Chapter 26 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 26 Self-Projection. By self-projection is meant the faculty or ability to send out or cause to travel to a distance the etheric self or double by an effort of will. This seems to be to some extent inherent in some individuals and occurs with them spontaneously and almost against their will. They go into trance and, at the end of a certain time, find that they have left their bodies and traveled to some distant scene. This, however, is rare. In the majority of the cases, the power has to be developed by long and assiduous cultivation. Of what the thought body is composed. Before I come to speak of this projection of the self, a few words are necessary as to the nature and composition of this etheric body, or double, which is thus projected. The physical body is composed of millions of tiny cells, and in each cell there is a center or nucleus of energy. This center is so infinitely small that it cannot be detected even by the highest powered microscope. All that we know is that physical matter in the cell is in some way vitalized or rendered living when it comes in contact with this vital center. The source of the energy is invisible and cannot be determined by us. It seems to well up from nowhere. Now, this center of energy constitutes a sort of psychic point or cell of its own, and as there are millions of them in the body, corresponding to the number of physical cells, it is obvious that there are millions of vital cells which conform exactly to the shape of the body, since they correspond to its physical cells in life. These psychic centers have been called psychomeres, and their bulk is estimated at about 1/1,000,000th that of the physical body. The density of etheric double therefore would be about 1/1,000,000th as dense as the physical body. The combined weight of these psychomeres has been variously estimated, but probably varies between that of the 10 postage stamps and 1 ounce and a half. This would represent the weight of the astral or etheric body, and is such that it would float slowly upward through the physical atmosphere as would a balloon. This fact coincides with what we know of the gradual floating upward of the spiritual body after death. Inner finer bodies. It is this body which we inhabit after we discard the denser physical frame. It is not necessary to suppose that our consciousness is scattered throughout the whole of this body any more than it is at present. The center of spiritual activity and the power of the will and mind may be a point of force, so to speak, within this etheric double, and we may utilize and animate it just as we utilize and animate the physical body in this life. After a time it is probable that we discard this etheric body, to assume one of even lesser density, and that this process continues a number of times until the spirit ultimately inhabits one of such infinitely fine matter, if such it can be called, that it is practically a mental or spiritual body. This is what we learn from many spirits who have communicated such facts to us. It is this body, therefore, which becomes disengaged from the physical body during life and goes on trips or excursions, carrying with it the consciousness of the individual, and returns to animate the physical body at the end of a certain period of time. Possible dangers and how they are overcome. When this disunion or severance takes place, there is always a connecting link, a magnetic cord, which unites the physical and the etheric bodies. If this cord were to get broken for any reason, reanimation would be impossible, and the death of the body would take place. This is the great danger attendant upon experiments of this character, but such a phenomena is only possible in cases of very deep trance, where the separation is almost complete, and very little serves to disconnect it entirely. It is highly improbable that any but the most advanced student could reach this stage. And when he has reached it, certain mystical inner practices may be resorted to, which would offset this possible danger. It is this body which is occasionally photographed, and many so-called spirit photographs are in reality photographs, not of discarnate but of incarnate spirits. That is, they are wandering doubles of spirits still in the flesh. Again, many apparitions and figures seen in haunted houses are of this nature. They constitute the projections of living persons rather than those who have passed over, and it takes an experienced psychic student to distinguish between the two types of figures. They have been known to appear at séances, also in the form of materializations. In addition to these etheric bodies or doubles, there may also be mental or thought bodies, created entirely by the mind and the will of the subject. Thus, in a case known to us, a clairvoyant was sent on a trip to the house of a friend and asked to describe the individual whom she found there. She described a certain person in detail, hair, eyes, features, etc., given at great length. When the psychic had finished and recovered full consciousness, she was told that her description was entirely wrong, and that no such person existed in the house in question, and her description was throughout erroneous. In order to prove this, a journey was made at once to the house of the subject in question. When the facts were stated, he replied that although he himself did not in any way resemble the clairvoyant description, this corresponded exactly and in 1 minute detail to a character he was creating and writing about in his book. In other words, his thoughts had created the figure so vividly that it actually lived for the time being as an objective entity, and was seen as such by the entranced clairvoyant. We can see from this, then, that thoughts are things. They assume shape, and, in a certain sense, live in the physical world. All our thoughts have a definite shape as well as a definite color, and the more advanced students along the path of development can see and describe these thoughts, we are told, as clearly as we see objects. How the selves may be projected. If this may be true, it has a very significant bearing upon cases which occur and have been reported in the past. For example, the reader will doubtless recall the case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, a most important case for all students to study. Here, as we know, the original individual finally became two. Dr. Jekyll developed another self, calling himself Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll was kindly, helpful, and sympathetic. Hyde was evil, malicious, and wholly repulsive. These two selves were developed in the original person, and the split between them became greater and greater as the months went by. Finally, Mr. Hyde assumed complete supremacy, and Dr. Jekyll vanished forever. In this case, it was not a mere change of personality which could be accounted for on any psychological grounds. It was an actual physical transformation. Apparently, there were two separate bodies, which were transformed one into the other. Suppose now that the good self, Dr. Jekyll, also the bad self, Mr. Hyde, existing as separate mental beings, each had the power of self-projection. They would each create by their own thoughts a separate body, and this being would resemble in outward appearance the thoughts which created it. Cases of this character might, therefore, exist and might conceivably be explained on scientific principles. We must be careful, then, of the character of the thought self which we build up. For if this resembles outwardly its inner structure, we may, many of us, come to resemble monstrosities rather than human beings, at some stage of our development when the plane is reached where thoughts predominate and shape the expression of the self. This idea has been graphically portrayed in John Uri Lloyd's book, Etudorfer. This inner etheric body, which is expelled to a distance by the power of will, in cases of self-projection, may be released and projected by the student after a certain amount of practice. He should go about this cautiously, feeling his way as if it were but proceeding more or less along the following lines. Place yourself in a perfectly composed attitude, either on a couch or in a large chair. Close the eyes and breathe deeply for a few minutes, all the time holding the mind on a central point of concentration. Travel over your body in thought, and at each point or spot dwelt upon by you, will that your etheric body becomes detached or loosened from its connection with the physical body. As you begin to gain control of this process, you may hear or rather sense a process of separation taking place, resembling a click, and inwardly feeling like the disconnection of an electric current. When this has been completed at one point, travel to another. Do not try too many on any one occasion, and always be sure to restore by an effort of will the original connected condition before you terminate the experiment. Further directions and advice. After you have gone round your body in this way, and have succeeded in disconnecting it more or less completely, you should then call up before you in space a certain distant locality, such as the room of a friend, and throwing the whole force of your being into a single determined effort of will, force yourself mentally to leave your body and travel to the locality before you. If you feel that you are losing consciousness, or that everything is going black before you, discontinue the experiment at once and return to your physical body. If you can keep your self-consciousness active, you may safely travel to any distance, feeling assured that you will be able to return whenever you want to and reanimate your own physical frame. All this, of course, takes time and persistence of development and cannot be acquired in a few days. Moreover, I would advise the student not to attempt this process until he has progressed further in his studies and read the advice contained in the last chapter. Should he, however, make up his mind to do so, he should proceed along the above lines, advancing cautiously all the time and never allowing himself to lose consciousness at any stage of the proceedings. When he has acquired this power, he will have in his possession a wonderful knowledge and a means of acquiring information and spiritual insight which others, who have not developed it, are totally unable to comprehend. End of chapter 26.